Hey, welcome to Half the Battle. Well, the Doctor Venom story arc is officially over, but that doesn't mean that we don't have something more to talk about. You see, here on Half the Battle, we show some love to all characters. And that's why it would feel wrong to leave two important ones out, just because they didn't get toys in the original toy line.
So, with that in mind, let's talk about Doctor Venom and Quinn the Eskimo.
Come on without, come on within. You'll not see nothing like the mighty Quinn.
Okay, and maybe, just maybe, I just wanted to use that song one last time.
Let's start with Doctor Venom. This guy is a dick. He's an evil psychopath, a megalomaniac that doesn't seem to have any remorse and seems incapable of understanding basic concepts like love. He'll cruelly use anything and anyone to further his goals, and torture is usually his first plan, not his last. I hate this guy, and I wanted him to die violently. Yeah, I wanted bad things to happen to him. I wanted to see him suffer and get his just desserts. I pretty much hated him.
And that makes him an awesome character. One that's extremely well written. He's a guy you love to hate. They just got everything right when they put this guy together.
In that regard, I'd go so far as to compare him to Joffrey from Game of Thrones. A person that's so irredeemable, that's so psychotically evil, you find yourself coming back time after time to see if he gets any kind of comeuppance, big or small. You live for the moments when they get slapped or beaten. There's another parallel with Joffrey. With both characters, you were waiting for them to die, and you knew you were gonna celebrate.
But when it actually happened, I wasn't cheering. Granted, this was for completely different reasons.
In Joffrey's case, they made it look as uncomfortable as possible to watch, while with Dr. Venom, it was essentially a pointless, easily avoidable death. A pointless death to make a point, really. The only reason Venom died was because of his own hubris. All he had to do to not die was not strike out in anger against Quinn. Instead, he shoots the Eskimo in the back, causing a grenade he was carrying to fall at his feet, blowing him up. If only he had let go of his hatred, he would have lived to get punched in the face another day. Of course, it's hard to break out of the habit of a lifetime. If you follow the Venom story arc, you know that between getting out of bed in the morning and brushing his teeth, he'll have at least once tried to kill Quinn or Snake Eyes. All this brings us to Quinn the Eskimo, and yes, he really was named after that Bob Dylan song I keep playing you, though admittedly it's spelled differently. He was introduced all the way back in issue 2 of the comic, and to be honest, he was an archetype back then. Somebody from an indigenous people with a mysterious background and a rigid code of honor. And since the story is set at the North Pole, of course they're gonna make him an Eskimo. The character wasn't bad, really. Hell, he even got the better of Snake Eyes, which was a big deal even back then, but he just seemed a bit too stereotypical. Then, they did a rather clever thing. They brought Quinn back, working for Cobra this time, but in South America, and they never make a big deal about seeing an Eskimo there, not playing to the stereotype. He's a mercenary, and he'll go wherever he's paid to go. This even sort of retcons the reason we saw him at the North Pole. He was paid to go there, he just happened to be an Eskimo, so there's kudos to be given there. They did, however, give his character more shamanistic traits, with his belief in spirit animals. He'd often talk about these creatures inhabiting a person, in his case the spirit of the bear. A pretty straightforward choice, really, since the primary characteristic of that animal is strength and confidence. Two things that Quinn certainly didn't lack. This guy really became a fan favorite over time, and it was often lamented that he never got a toy in the original line, because he wasn't a Hasbro character, and also very, very dead.
But this review is called Quinn and Venom, since you really can't talk about one without talking about the other and their relationship. A relationship that grew over time and may not even have been intended from the start.
When Venom was introduced, he was clearly meant to be a foil for Snake Eyes. Hell, during their first meeting, the Doctor tortures the guy to death.
Don't worry, he got better.
And even when they meet again in South America, it seems clear Snake Eyes was out to get even. But then things started to change subtly. Quinn was thrown in the mix, and he quickly turned on Doctor Venom when the latter ordered Snake Eyes killed after the Eskimo had promised he would not be harmed. After that moment, Venom spent his trying to kill people time equally between Quinn and Snake Eyes, even when they were all forced to work together. Quinn believes that the Doctor has the spirit of the weasel in him, for, at first glance, obvious reasons. When you think of a weasel, good things don't really come to mind.
Of course, for me, being a product of my time, when I think of the word weasel, I generally think about this guy.
Ah, Bobby the Brain Heenan, a legendary wrestling manager and commentator that, by coincidence, you also love to hate. There's a lot more to it than that, though. While the weasel aspect does focus on the negative here, the spirit is also known for digging deep to solve problems and being relentless in the pursuit of the truth, something that a scientist would do. The weasel is also relentless in pursuing their prey, sometimes to their detriment, which is also exactly what happened to Doctor Venom. At the same time, the bear spirit isn't just about strength, but also about healing, be it emotionally or physically. It teaches that it's time to stop and heal yourself, something Quinn does when he recognizes that he's become more like the weasel than the bear in his own pursuit of Venom. This is what I mean when I said that Venom stopped being a foil for Snake Eyes. He and Quinn had developed their own story, only somewhat related to G.I. Joe in general and Snake Eyes specifically. I think the change occurs while they are imprisoned after crashing a bomber on Miami Beach while Venom walks free. From that moment on, Quinn is the one obsessed with going after Venom, while Snake Eyes seems to be just along for the ride, while wearing a really silly hat. It's clear that Larry Hama, who created the characters, really did some research when it came to all this spirit animal stuff. And remember, this was a time before the Google, so he had to read a book or talk to people to find out more about this shamanistic stuff. Nowadays, any hack can just look this stuff up on the internet and then spout off this information as if it were his own.
On second thought, forget I said that part.
In these comics, the spirit animals aren't depicted as part of the person's soul, but as a distinct second entity existing within them. In fact, Quinn sees the weasel as a malevolent spirit that is actively trying to destroy Venom. And he turns out to be absolutely right, metaphorically speaking. Remember what I said. All Venom had to do was stop his relentless pursuit of Quinn, and he'd live. But he couldn't help himself. The weasel was too strong, killing him in the end. While Quinn and Venom are both compelling and interesting characters on their own, their interaction and ultimately their intertwined fates are what really set them apart.
Neither character was featured in the original toy line, but they did end up eventually getting action figures.
As far as Venom goes, I'm gonna have to be brief though. His only toy was a Collectors Club exclusive, and I don't have it. From what I've seen, it looks nice enough. But really, the character was just based on Venom. They gave him a new weird story involving man-eating plants. Also, they gave him a name, meaning Venom was a code name all along. Yeah, right. The real kicker, though, is they named him Monev, which is just Venom spelled backwards. I imagine he's from Nilbog.
I can't talk more about Quinn, though. He did end up getting not one, but two figures.
The first one I already talked about way back when I reviewed the second ever G.I. Joe comic. They repainted Big Ben's body and gave it a new head sculpt, making it somewhat resemble the Quinn from that comic issue. The figure was good considering what they had to work with at the time. You have to understand, there was no budget to create new body sculpts and little for accessories. kudos then that they did include his famous skull necklace. At the time, we were really just happy to have a Quinn figure at all, but we did dream of what they could have done with a full budget to really do the character justice.
And guess what? Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus, and dreams do come true. In 2013, in the Retaliation line of all places, we finally got our wish.
A brand new Quinn action figure with all the bells and whistles, almost exactly 30 years after he first appeared looking like that. This is one hell of a toy. There's lots of detailing, a ton of extra articulation points, including double-jointed knees, and a massive, and I mean massive, amount of accessories. I mean, look at this stuff! I only have two small criticisms when it comes to this guy. Firstly, one of his eyes is off slightly, but that seems to be something that's just on my specific one. Secondly, his neck, while also detailed nicely, should have been a little thicker. Other than that though, this guy is golden.
Then there's the accessories! Oh God, are there accessories?
He's got a shotgun, sniper rifle, a revolver, and a freaking massive machine gun. And that's just the stuff that shoots bullets. I mean, there's an ulu for God's sake. It's a traditional knife used by several indigenous tribes, including the Inuit. Now, that's some attention to detail there. Granted, it's traditionally used by women to process killed animals, but are you gonna tell this guy that he has a girly knife? Yeah, didn't think so. He also has an, stick with a blade poking out. I think it's supposed to be a pickaxe of some kind, or maybe an ice pick?
Look, I couldn't find a definitive answer on what it's supposed to be, okay? And I've already done so much research on this Eskimo stuff that my tribal name is now Google's too much.
His best accessory for me, though, he comes with a freaking bear trap. How cool is that? And you just know all this stuff. The axe, the ulu, the trap. It isn't for use on animals. It's all for when he meets Doctor Venom again. And I'll close out this accessory rant by pointing out that yes, there's the skull necklace again. Very nicely done. This figure is as near to perfection as a G.I. Joe figure can get, people. And as of the time of this recording, you can still buy it. It's available at online retailers, and maybe you can even still find it in stores. So, if you've read the comics and liked Quinn, you owe it to yourself to pick this toy up. So, those were Doctor Venom and Quinn. A couple of great characters that deserved an extra send-off.
I'll see you guys next week. In the meanwhile, let's listen to that chorus one more time!
Come on without